In the year 1847, the heart of Mexico was restless. The city of San Luis Potosí, with its mountains, silver mines, and quiet plazas, stood at a crossroads of history. The Mexican-American War raged to the north, famine and poverty gnawed at villages, and whispers of disease filled the air. Many families lived in fear, clutching survival as if it were slipping sand. And yet, in the middle of these dark days, one family stood apart. Not because of wealth, not because of power, but because of their unwavering hope. This was the family of Don Rafael Martinez. Rafael was not a man of riches, though he worked in the silver mines that had once brought San Luis Potosí prosperity. His hands were scarred, his back bent, his lungs heavy with dust from years underground. Every morning, before the sun touched the rooftops, he would lace his boots, sling a worn leather satchel over his shoulder, and whisper a prayer before walking toward the mine. Work in the mines was dangerous. Men often did not return, but Rafael's courage was not only in his labor, it was in his refusal to allow hardship to harden him. When neighbors spoke of despair, he spoke of faith. When men cursed the earth for swallowing lives, he reminded them of the blessings of the sky above. He would often tell his children, "The world will take from you if you let it, but it cannot take your kindness. That is the one treasure the earth cannot swallow." If Rafael was the family's backbone, Isabella, his wife, was the heart. Her hands were never still. From dawn till nightfall, she spun cotton, baked bread, and mended clothes not only for her children, but often for neighbors too poor to afford their own. She had a gift for turning scarcity into abundance. A single pot of beans, when stirred by her hands, seemed to feed an entire street. A piece of cloth, when cut and sewn by her, became not just clothing but comfort. But her greatest gift was the music of her voice. At night, when the candles flickered low, Isabella would sing lullabies, not just for her own 3 children, Maria, age 12, Tomas, age 8, and little Anna, age 5, but for the neighbors' children as well, who often pressed their ears to the thin walls just to hear her. Her songs carried a strange power. They did not erase hunger or silence the guns of war, but they reminded people that beauty still existed even in broken times. Their house was small, nothing more than a few wooden beams and clay walls, but it was alive with warmth. Strangers and neighbors alike knew they would not be turned away. During the winter of 1846, when sickness spread through the town, Isabella cared for a widow who had no family left. When a soldier passed through and collapsed from exhaustion, Rafael gave him food and a blanket, though they had little to spare. People whispered, "Los Martinez have little, yet they give much." And so, though the Martinez family owned no land, no business, no carriages or titles, they carried something far greater, the trust and respect of the community. The Martinez children reflected the spirit of their parents. Maria, the eldest, was wise beyond her years. She often helped her mother with sewing and comforted her younger siblings when the nights grew frightening with the sounds of distant gunfire. She once told a neighbor girl, "Even when we are afraid, we can still be brave. My father says fear is real, but so is faith." Tomas, with his mischievous grin, carried hope wherever he went. He often gave away his own bread to children hungrier than him, laughing when Isabella scolded him gently. "But Mama, their stomachs are louder than mine." Little Anna, though only 5, had a smile that softened even the hardest miners returning from the earth. Her laughter was like a bell, clear and bright, reminding weary men of their own children waiting at home. Together, the 3 children embodied the future their parents dreamed of, a future built not on riches but on goodness. The year 1847 was not kind. News from the north told of battles lost, soldiers dying, and families displaced. Food grew scarce, disease lingered. Many in San Luis Potosí began to whisper that God had abandoned them. But the Martinez family did not bend to despair. Every Sunday, even when their shoes were worn thin, they walked to the small chapel, heads held high, children's hands clasped tightly in their parents'. And when neighbors sat outside their homes crying from hunger, Rafael would share what little they had, saying, "If we all carry each other, no one falls." Their lives became a sermon louder than words. Neighbors often said that when you passed by the Martinez home, you could feel something different. Not wealth, not strength, but peace. One widow remembered, "When my son was taken by fever, Isabella came to me. She did not have medicine, but she sang to me, and I swear for that one night the pain lifted. A miner once said, when Raphael prayed before entering the mine, we all prayed, and when he smiled, we all found courage to keep digging. Even the local priest remarked, this family does not just live, they give life. And so, in the midst of war, famine, and uncertainty, the Martinez family stood as a living testimony that hope could still be chosen. But fate is strange. Sometimes it does not allow the good to remain where we expect them. Sometimes their story is written not in how long they lived, but in the light they left behind. No one knew that the Martinez family, this family of hope, was walking toward a mystery that no science, no priest, and no soldier would ever be able to explain. Yet perhaps, before their disappearance, they had already given the world what it needed most. The reminder that even in the hardest of times, we can choose love over fear, generosity over greed, and faith over despair. The Martinez family's story teaches us this. Hardship does not erase goodness. In fact, it makes it shine brighter. Every one of us lives in uncertain times, just as they did. The world will always have its wars, its shortages, its illnesses, its fears. But what will people say of us when we are gone? Will they remember that we complained, hoarded, and despaired? Or will they remember, like the Martinez family, that we gave what little we had, we shared our bread, we lifted each other's burdens, and we left behind a legacy not of wealth, but of hope? This is why their story still speaks today. Not because of how they vanished, but because of how they lived before the night came. The evening of August 18th, 1847 began like so many others in San Luis Potosí. The summer air was warm, the streets quiet after a day of toil, and the golden dusk settled over the adobe rooftops. For the Martinez family, it was a night of simplicity and joy, one of those rare moments when hardship seemed to loosen its grip. Inside their modest clay-walled home, the light of a single candle flickered against the plaster. The children laughed as Isabella stirred a pot of beans, her wooden spoon tapping gently against the rim. Raphael sat by the window, polishing his worn boots, the sound of distant crickets filling the silence between bursts of laughter. Neighbors later said it was the happiest they had heard the family in months. There was no special occasion that night, no birthday or feast. But sometimes the greatest celebrations are born out of nothing more than the need to feel alive. Maria, their eldest daughter, braided her mother's hair while softly humming a hymn. Tomas, restless as always, practiced tapping a rhythm on the wooden table with a spoon. Little Anna tried to sing along, her childish voice rising and falling, bringing laughter to her parents. When supper was served, beans, tortillas, and a small slice of goat cheese, Raphael lifted his cup of water and said, "Tonight, we thank God not for what we lack, but for what we have." The family bowed their heads. Outside, a few neighbors passing by could hear faint music and laughter coming from the small home. One of them, Dona Pillar, later remembered, it was the sound of life. In those days, joy was rare. That night, the Martinez gave joy to the street. Around 9 o'clock, a young shepherd boy walking home from the fields swore he saw Raphael outside, leaning against the doorway. The father gave him a small wave before going back inside. That would be the last time anyone ever saw him. By midnight, the street was silent, the candlelight gone. The next morning, August 19th, the sun rose hot and merciless. The town began to stir. Vendors set up stalls, children fetched water, and men trudged toward the mines. But something felt unusual outside the Martinez home. The shutters remained closed, though Raphael was always among the first to greet the day. Smoke did not rise from the chimney. No sound came from within. Around 8, Dona Pillar, kneading maize flour, knocked at their door. "Comadre Isabella," she called. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. Still silence. The only sound was the faint creak of the wooden door under her hand. Finally, she pushed it open. What she found chilled her to the bone. The fire in the hearth was still burning faintly, as if it had been left only hours before. A pot of beans sat half-eaten on the table, a wooden spoon resting inside. Raphael's hat hung on the peg by the door, his satchel leaning against the wall, ready for work but untouched. Maria's embroidery sat unfinished on the chair, needles still threaded. Tomas's small toy horse carved from wood lay on the floor as if dropped mid-play. Anna's blanket was crumpled on the bed, but the family was gone. Not a single trace of struggle, not a single footprint leading away. It was as though they had simply stood up, walked into the night air, and dissolved into it. Donna Pillar screamed, and within minutes neighbors crowded the doorway. Murmurs filled the air. Where could they have gone? Did they flee in the night? No, everything is still here. Look. The coins Raphael had saved sat untouched in a clay jar. Isabella's small cross necklace lay neatly on the dresser, their clothing hung on hooks, their shoes lined by the bed. If they had fled, why leave everything behind? Fear spread like wildfire. Some whispered of bandits, others of spirits. A few wondered if soldiers had taken them, but no doors were broken, no windows shattered. There were no wagon tracks, no hoof prints, nothing. Just silence. Authorities were called, though in those days investigation was little more than searching and questioning. The house was combed inch by inch. No blood, no signs of poison, no disturbance of furniture. Outside, men searched the dirt roads for footprints, scoured the nearby fields, and even lowered lanterns into abandoned wells. Nothing. One soldier suggested the family had been kidnapped by American scouts. But why would they leave their money, food, and belongings? Another said they may have wandered off into the desert. But where were their tracks? The absence was too perfect, too clean. The priest, Father Santiago, was summoned. After a long look around the house, he whispered, "Not even God has given me an answer. There is no explanation that fits what I see." Within days, San Luis Potosí was buzzing. Some claimed to have heard faint singing near the Martinez home at night, as though Isabella's voice lingered. Others said they saw candlelight in the window, though the house was empty. Superstitions grew. Some believed the family had been taken by La Llorona, the spirit said to steal children. Others said they had been chosen by God, lifted in the night. Skeptics argued they must have staged their disappearance, though no reason could be found. But as weeks turned into months, no trace was ever uncovered. The Martinez family had vanished as though erased. For the neighbors, the disappearance was more than a mystery. It was a wound. Children cried at night, missing their playmates. Miners felt uneasy entering the earth without Raphael's steady presence. Women longed for Isabella's songs that once softened their grief. The absence of the family was louder than their presence had ever been. And yet, in that emptiness, something remarkable happened. Neighbors began to gather more often, cooking for each other, sharing stories of the Martinez family's kindness. They began to look after one another's children, inspired by Isabella's open arms. The miners started praying before entering the earth, echoing Raphael's example. The mystery of their disappearance became a call to the living, to hold tighter to family, to give more freely, to cherish each moment, for tomorrow is never promised. The night of the Martinez family's vanishing remains unsolved to this day. Historians have tried to reason it away. Bandits, disease, secret flight, but none of the explanations match the evidence left behind. Not even science can explain it, but perhaps the lesson lies not in the mystery but in the memory. Their disappearance forces us to ask, what if tonight were our last night? What legacy would we leave behind? Would the world remember our anger, our greed, our fear? Or would they remember our kindness, our courage, and our faith? The Martinez family lived in such a way that their absence became just as powerful as their presence. Their vanishing was a tragedy, but their life was a message to live every day with purpose, generosity, and love, for time is never guaranteed. That August night in 1847, a candle was blown out in San Luis Potosí. A family of 5 was erased from the earth in silence. Yet nearly 2 centuries later, their story continues to echo, not as a tale of loss, but as a lesson of life. For no matter how sudden the darkness, the light they left behind remains. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all, not how they vanished, but how their goodness refuses to disappear. When the Martinez family vanished on that strange night in August 1847, the shock that rippled through San Luis Potosí was immediate and profound. At first, neighbors believed there must be some logical explanation. Families did not simply vanish, not in a world of horses, carts, and dirt paths where every footprint told a story. But as hours turned into days, the reality sank in. The Martinez family had disappeared without a trace. And so began one of the most bewildering investigations in the history of the region, an investigation that, despite every effort, led absolutely nowhere. The first to arrive were the local constables, men armed with rifles but little training in the art of investigation. Their work was usually chasing down bandits or keeping peace in the market, not unraveling mysteries that seemed more like riddles of heaven and earth. The constables organized a search, neighbors volunteered, and within hours, groups of men spread across the countryside. They combed the nearby fields, climbed the foothills, and searched the abandoned mines. Lanterns were lowered into dry wells, fearing perhaps the family had fallen victim to some hidden crime. Dogs were brought to sniff the area, but even they were confused. They followed no scent beyond the Martinez doorstep. The animals barked, whined, and eventually lay down as if bewildered. The town was restless. Mothers pulled their children closer. Fathers warned their families not to walk the roads alone. The disappearance was not just a mystery, it was a threat. If the Martinez family could vanish, then no one was safe. With no evidence, theories began to multiply. Some believed the family had been kidnapped. But if so, why leave all their possessions untouched? Bandits were ruthless but never foolish. They would have stolen food, money, or even livestock. None of it was touched. 1847 was a year of blood and fear. Some whispered that American soldiers, or even deserters, had taken them in the night. But the town was far from the front lines, and no military tracks or signs of passage were found. A few suggested that Raphael had taken his family and fled into the desert, either to escape war or pursue some secret plan. But anyone who knew Raphael knew better. He was rooted to his town, to his people, to the mines. To leave without shoes, clothing, or food would have been suicide. When reason failed, superstition filled the void. Some claimed La Llorona had taken the children, and the parents followed. Others whispered that the family had been taken up, chosen by God in the night. Such explanations were born not of logic, but of desperation. The rumors grew so loud that word eventually reached the state governor's office. San Luis Potosí was already under tension because of the war, and the unexplained vanishing of an entire family threatened to stir panic. A formal inquiry was ordered. Officials arrived, better dressed and more stern than the local constables. They questioned neighbors, wrote down testimonies, and documented the strange details of the Martinez home. Donna Pillar testified about the music and laughter she had heard the evening before. A shepherd boy spoke of seeing Raphael at the doorway, waving. Another neighbor swore she saw candlelight at midnight, though no one was inside by morning. The officials filled pages with these accounts. But when it came to evidence, there was none. For weeks, the Martinez home stood untouched, guarded by soldiers. Yet nothing new was discovered. By day, it was a place of curiosity, people peeking in to see the frozen image of family life abruptly interrupted. By night, it became a place of fear. Some claimed to hear voices inside. Others said they smelled Isabella's cooking in the air. A few swore they saw a child's shadow in the window, though the house was empty. The investigation team dismissed these stories as imagination, but privately, even they were unsettled. Months passed, and the authorities slowly abandoned the case. With war raging and resources scarce, they could no longer afford to chase ghosts. The official conclusion, written in bureaucratic language, was that the Martinez family had departed voluntarily or under duress by unknown means. It was a statement that explained nothing. The town was left with silence, no graves to mourn, no evidence to cling to, no answers to comfort the children who asked, "Where did Ana go? Where did Tomas and Maria go?" The investigation that led nowhere did more than leave a mystery. It taught the people of San Luis Potosí a harsh truth. Life does not always provide explanations. Sometimes tragedies occur without reason. Sometimes we are left with only questions and silence, and in those moments, what matters most is not the answer, but the response. The neighbors of the Martinez family could have given in to fear. They could have locked their doors and closed their hearts. Instead, many of them chose to honor the memory of the vanished family by living as the Martinez had lived, with generosity, with faith, with community. They remembered Rafael's prayers, Isabella's songs, the children's laughter. They told stories of their kindness, keeping their legacy alive. The Martinez disappearance is still remembered because of its unsolvable nature. But the deeper lesson lies in the failure of the investigation. It reminds us that life will not always give us answers. There will be times when we face loss, heartbreak, or confusion, and no amount of searching will explain why. But even in the face of mystery, we can choose how to live. We can despair, or we can continue the work of those who came before us, spreading kindness, choosing courage, building faith. The investigators failed to find the Martinez family. But the community found something else. The truth that our lives are defined not by what we lose, but by what we give. And so, the investigation closed, but the story did not. The official records say nothing more than unsolved. But the hearts of San Luis Potosí still carried the memory of the family that disappeared in a single night. Not even science could explain it. Not even faith could fully answer it. Yet their light continued to burn in the lives of those who remembered them. When the Martinez family vanished in the summer of 1847, their absence struck the people of San Luis Potosí like a blow to the chest. At first, there was fear, then confusion, then silence. The official search ended with no resolution, the authorities closed their files, and the world seemed to move on. But for the people who had shared bread with Rafael, who had listened to Isabella's songs, and who had laughed with the children, forgetting was impossible. Their home stood empty, but their memory refused to fade, and slowly the community realized something powerful. The Martinez family's absence was itself a kind of presence, a lesson that would continue to speak long after their voices were gone. Most disappearances are remembered for the mystery. People talk about the unanswered questions, the theories, the fear, but the Martinez family was different. Yes, people whispered about how they vanished. But what truly lingered was the way they had lived. Neighbors remembered Rafael's habit of sharing food with hungry miners. They remembered Isabella's habit of knocking on doors when she had extra bread, never keeping what she could give away. They remembered Maria's gentle patience with children, Tomas's jokes that lightened even the hardest days, and Anna's laughter that melted sorrow. Their disappearance was unsolved, but their life was unforgettable. And that was the first lesson. How you live will always speak louder than how you leave. In the weeks after the family vanished, many neighbors began to feel the weight of their absence. It wasn't just the silence of the home. It was the loss of the daily acts of kindness that had rippled through the community. One miner said, "When Rafael prayed, we prayed. Now we must pray for him." A widow said, "When Isabella sang, we felt less alone. Now we must sing for each other." And so, neighbors began to imitate what the family had once given freely. Mothers gathered children in the evenings to tell them stories, just as Isabella once did. Miners gathered at dawn to say a prayer before entering the earth, remembering Rafael's example. Children shared their food more freely, inspired by Tomas. It was as if the absence of the family had planted seeds of kindness in every heart. What they once gave directly, now others carried forward. Their light did not vanish, it multiplied. The Martinez disappearance also awakened a sobering truth. Life is fragile. One evening you can hear the laughter of a family, the next morning their house can stand empty. No warning, no explanation, no time to say goodbye. For the townspeople, this was a wake-up call. Men who had been bitter toward their families softened their words, realizing tomorrow was not guaranteed. Women who had carried grudges began to forgive, recognizing that time wasted in anger could never be reclaimed. Children learned to treasure every embrace, knowing even parents could vanish without a trace. The Martinez family taught San Luis Potosí that you cannot control the length of your days, but you can control the love you give within them. A strange thing began to happen in the years after the disappearance. The story of the Martinez family spread beyond San Luis Potosí. Travelers passing through heard of it and carried the tale to nearby villages. Priests spoke of them in sermons, not as a mystery, but as an example of a faithful household. The family's absence became their testimony. People who had never met them were inspired to live more generously, more faithfully, more lovingly, because they had heard of a family who lived with such light that even when they disappeared, their story continued to shine. That is the power of legacy. A house can crumble, a body can vanish, but the influence of a good life endures. The great question of the Martinez family's disappearance was not where did they go, but what do we remember? The townspeople could have chosen to focus only on the fear, the mystery, the unanswered questions, but they chose differently. They chose to remember Raphael's prayers, Isabella's songs, and the children's joy. They chose to tell those stories, not the stories of terror, and in that choice was another lesson. We cannot always control what happens to us, but we can control the story that is told about us. When your life ends, whether suddenly or in old age, what will people say? Will they speak of your anger, your selfishness, your greed, or will they speak of your kindness, your courage, your faith? The Martinez family had little wealth, little power, but they chose to live with love. And that is what the world remembered. The people of San Luis Potosí eventually realized something profound. The Martinez family gave them one final gift. Their absence forced everyone else to live differently. Before, it was easy to depend on the family for light. Need encouragement? Go to Raphael. Need comfort? Go to Isabella. Need laughter? Play with the children. But when they were gone, the community had to become what they had once received. The men had to be stronger for each other, the women had to comfort one another, the children had to share kindness. Their absence forced others to rise higher, to carry forward the torch of love and hope. In this way, the family's disappearance was not just a tragedy, it was a lesson. When one light goes out, others must choose to shine brighter. We all face mysteries in life. Sometimes we lose people suddenly, and no answer comes. Sometimes we face moments of suffering that no science, no faith, no logic can fully explain. The story of the Martinez family reminds us that the absence of those we love is not the end of their influence. If they lived with love, then their absence becomes a teacher, shaping how we move forward. And so the question comes to us, what lesson will your life leave behind when you are gone? Whether tomorrow or decades from now, what will remain? The money you gathered will fade, the possessions you collected will be scattered, but your kindness, your faith, your courage, those will remain in the lives you touched. The Martinez family disappeared in a single night. But the lesson hidden in their absence was eternal. Live so fully, so faithfully, that even if your life ends without explanation, your light will never disappear. Today, more than 175 years later, the Martinez mystery is still whispered in San Luis Potosí. Not as a ghost story, not as a legend of fear, but as a reminder. Their absence still speaks. It tells us that life is short, that love is stronger than mystery, that kindness outlives death. And that the greatest gift we can give the world is to live in such a way that even when we are gone, we are never truly absent. History is not only a collection of dates and names, it is a mirror held up to humanity. It reflects who we were, how we lived, and the lessons we either embraced or ignored. The Martinez family's disappearance in San Luis Potosí in 1847 is one of those stories that refuses to fade into silence. On the surface, it seems like a tragedy too mysterious to fully explain, yet beneath the shadows of uncertainty lies a truth. Such stories, whether solved or unsolved, have the power to teach us something about life, faith, resilience, and the fleeting nature of our days. The Martinez family was not made of kings or generals. They were ordinary people, farmers and dreamers, struggling to survive in a time when the world seemed to be falling apart. Mexico was at war, communities were restless, and poverty had struck deep into the soil. Still, they had something rare, hope. That hope carried them through famine, sickness, and fear. But in one single night, that fragile thread snapped. They vanished, leaving only questions behind. And yet, while we cannot solve their disappearance with science or reason, we can reflect on the echoes of their story. Because sometimes the value of history is not in what we can prove, but in what it inspires us to consider. The Martinez mystery is more than a riddle. It is a lesson for every generation. Let us uncover what we can truly learn from it. The Martinez family's story reminds us of a truth many of us prefer to avoid. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. They sat around their table, spoke of their crops, shared laughter and worries, and then, within hours, were gone. We live our lives as though we are invincible. We wake up, go to work, argue with loved ones, or delay forgiveness, always assuming there will be more time. But what if there isn't? What if life, like the Martinez story, takes an unexpected turn? The first lesson we learn is this: do not waste your days. Hold your loved ones closer. Speak kindness more often. Apologize while you can. Pursue the dreams you keep postponing, because the fragility of life is not meant to scare us. It is meant to awaken us. The Martinez family teaches us that time is not endless, and that alone should drive us to live fully and deeply while we can. If we look at the history of the Martinez family before their vanishing, one detail stands out. They were survivors of hardship. Famine had tested them. Political unrest had shaken their land. Yet they carried on with a spirit of resilience. That spirit is something worth remembering. Every family, every individual faces dark seasons. Maybe for us it's not famine or war, but financial struggles, broken relationships, or personal battles with anxiety and fear. And in those times it feels easier to give up than to keep believing. But the Martinez family held on to hope until their very last day on record. And that teaches us something vital. Hope is not foolish. Hope is fuel. It's the power that keeps a person walking when every reason to quit has already arrived. It may not solve every problem, but it gives us the courage to keep pressing forward. In your own trials, remember their resilience. If they could hold on, so can you. The disappearance of the Martinez family remains unexplained. Historians, scientists, and storytellers have debated for nearly 2 centuries, yet no answer has satisfied the mystery. To some, this is frustrating. We want closure, explanation, and certainty, but life is not always so neat. Sometimes, tragedies in our own lives make no sense. Why did we lose someone we loved so early? Why did the door we prayed for never open? Why do we work hard only to face disappointment? These are mysteries of life, and often they remain unanswered. The Martinez story teaches us to make peace with the unknown. Instead of wasting our lives demanding answers that may never come, we can choose to grow from the questions. Faith, resilience, and acceptance become our tools. The mystery remains, but it no longer controls us. One of the haunting aspects of the Martinez disappearance is that they vanished together. Some see tragedy in this, others see beauty. For in their final chapter, whatever happened to them, they faced it as one. Unity is a lesson we desperately need today. Families are divided, communities are fractured, nations are polarized. Fear often isolates us, convincing us that we are safer alone. But true safety, true resilience, comes from standing together. The Martinez family reminds us that we are stronger when we cling to one another. Their unity in disappearance is symbolic of what we should embrace in life, to walk hand in hand through trials rather than apart. Fear divides, but love unites, and unity will always outlive fear. Here we are, nearly 2 centuries later, still speaking about a humble family from San Luis Potosí. Why? Because even though their lives ended in mystery, their story became larger than themselves. This should challenge us. What kind of legacy are we leaving behind? Is it one of bitterness, anger, and regret, or one of kindness, faith, and resilience? The Martinez family's legacy was not chosen by them. It was carved out by their perseverance in life and the mystery of their end. And now generations remember them. The truth is, our lives are not just about the years we live, but about the impact we leave. You may never know how your words, your actions, or your struggles will inspire someone else. Live in such a way that even when you are gone, your story still speaks. Finally, the Martinez mystery forces us to confront the spiritual side of life. When science cannot explain, when history cannot clarify, when reason fails, faith becomes the only anchor. Faith does not erase questions, but it allows us to live with them. Faith does not promise us every answer, but it promises us peace in uncertainty. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The Martinez family's story invites us to lean on something greater than ourselves. Whether you call it God, providence, or divine order, it is the belief that there is meaning even in the shadows. And when life presents you with mysteries that wound the heart, faith is the hand that steadies you. The Martinez family disappeared in one night, and history has not solved their riddle. But maybe their true gift to us is not in the mystery itself, but in the meaning we draw from it. They teach us that life is fragile but worth treasuring, that hope is stronger than hardship, that unity is more powerful than fear, and that faith is our anchor in uncertainty. So when you think of the Martinez family, don't just think of the night they vanished. Think of the days they lived, the lessons they left behind, and the reminder that your life, too, has meaning beyond measure. Because history's greatest mysteries are not meant to leave us confused. They are meant to leave us wiser. And in that wisdom, the Martinez family leaves on. Every person, no matter how ordinary their existence may appear, leaves behind a story. Some stories are written in books, others in songs, and some only in the whispered memories of family and friends. But one truth remains. Your life is the message you leave behind for the world. And this message is not built in the grand gestures, not in the monuments or in wealth, but in the daily choices, the unseen sacrifices, the kindness given when nobody was watching, and the courage to stand tall in the face of trials. The Martinez family of San Luis Potosí, who mysteriously vanished one night in 1847, may never be fully explained by science or history. Their disappearance remains a haunting mystery, but perhaps the most important part of their story is not the unknown end, but the life they lived before it. They left behind not fear, not bitterness, but an enduring testimony of resilience, faith, and unity, and that is what matters for every single one of us, how we are remembered, what our life communicates long after we are gone. People often imagine legacies as something grand, statues, written works, businesses that carry on their name. But the truth is far simpler. Legacies are built in daily actions. Think of the father in the Martinez family who worked the land tirelessly, not just to feed his children but to model dignity and discipline, or the mother who kept the home warm with both food and tenderness. Their children saw this and learned. Their neighbors saw it and admired. None of it made headlines at the time, but it became their living message, a message of endurance in hard times. Your choices today, however small, are speaking louder than you think. The way you treat others, the way you rise from hardship, the way you keep your integrity when it would be easier to compromise, all of this forms your message, and when you are gone, it will echo in the lives of those you touched. Science may not explain how a family disappeared in a single night. Perhaps history will never uncover the truth, but what no mystery can erase is the clarity of the influence they left behind. Neighbors testified of their generosity, of how they shared food in years of famine, of how they welcomed strangers with kindness. These memories became the real inheritance they left behind. Not land, not wealth, but character. We often get distracted by chasing the things the world applauds. Titles, money, recognition, but at the end of the day, the world forgets your possessions, but it remembers your influence. It remembers the feeling you left with others. That is your message. That is what survives even when you are no longer here. The Martinez family lived in a time of hardship, war, famine, uncertainty, yet they carried themselves with hope. Their very existence was an example to their community that it was possible to endure without losing humanity. In your own life, hardship will come, people will disappoint you, circumstances will shake you. But the way you handle those moments writes your true story. Your greatest sermon is not spoken in words, it is lived in pain. Think of the power of a person who continues to believe in goodness even after betrayal. Think of the strength of someone who keeps faith alive even after loss. That is the kind of message people carry in their hearts long after you're gone. Even in their absence, the Martinez family continues to teach. Their sudden disappearance created a wound in the community, but also an awakening. Life is fragile, time is short, and what we do with it matters more than we think. You may not live to see the full impact of your actions. Sometimes the seeds you plant won't bloom until years after you are gone, but that doesn't mean they aren't growing. When you love, when you serve, when you stand firm in truth, you are sending out ripples that extend far beyond your lifetime. The Martinez family didn't know that their ordinary acts of kindness would echo in history, and you don't know how far your own acts will travel either. Imagine your life as a letter written to the world. Every word is a choice, every sentence an action, every page a season of your life. The question is, what will that letter say when it's read after you're gone? For some, it says bitterness, selfishness, cruelty. For others, it says courage, kindness, love. You're writing that letter right now, whether you realize it or not. The Martinez family's letter said unity, strength, and love. That is why people still remember them, not because of how they disappeared, but because of how they lived. If you want your message to be clear, start writing it intentionally. Choose patience over anger, service over selfishness, faith over fear. These are the lines of a story that others will remember forever. The final truth is this: your life is the message you leave behind, but it is also the living legacy you give while you are here. You don't have to wait until death for your influence to matter. People are reading your life right now. Children are watching, friends are learning, strangers are observing. When you smile in hardship, you are teaching hope. When you forgive when it hurts, you are teaching love. When you refuse to quit, you are teaching strength. The Martinez family may be gone, but their message remains alive because people continue to tell their story, and the same will be true for you. When your time comes, your possessions won't matter, but your message will. So live it well, live with faith, live with kindness, live with courage, because in the end that is what the world remembers. One night in 1847, a family vanished without a trace. Science has no answers. History is silent, but their life speaks, and that is the point for us today. We cannot control how or when our story ends, but we can control the message it leaves behind. Let your life say something worth remembering. Let your life teach something worth following. Let your life be a message that endures long after you are gone, because one day people will tell your story too, and the greatest gift you can leave behind is not mystery, not wealth, not fear, but a message of hope, faith, and love. You may not control when life ends or when mysteries strike, but you can control the legacy you leave behind. Live with kindness, courage, and faith, for that is the only immortality science cannot explain.